At 3 in the morning, my daughter collapsed at my doorstep. Her eyes were bruised and her lips were split. Sobbing, she confessed, "My husband hit me because of his mistress. I held her in silence. I helped her into the house, and without a word, I put on my police uniform. Ready, I loaded the bullets. Then I dialed my lawyer's number." Start the plan now. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has reached. I had just turned off the TV and slumped onto the sofa, my eyes half closed after a long, exhausting shift. Being a cop in this town wasn't always a matter of life and death, but that day I had to break up a fight at the downtown bar and then write the report until dawn. My body felt heavy. I just wanted to sleep deeply. Outside on the street, the barking of dogs mixed with the buzz of motorcycles from the neighbourhood, kids speeding by. It was already 3 hours in the morning, but the neighbourhood refused to sleep. I figured the guys were on the corner, smoking and drinking some beers like every night, I thought. I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the noises so my head could rest. Suddenly, a hurried knocking sounded at the door, so loud it made me jump. My heart raced and my police instincts kicked in immediately. Who could be knocking like that at this hour? I walked quickly to the entrance, grabbing a chair tightly just in case. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice a little shaky, not from fear, but because I felt something bad was happening. No one answered. There were just a couple more knocks, weaker this time, followed by a choked, trembling voice. "Mum, open up, please." I almost froze. It was the voice of Isla, my daughter, 26 years old. I unlocked the door in a hurry, my heart pounding in my chest. As soon as I opened it, Isla collapsed into my arms, trembling like a wounded animal. I hugged her tightly, feeling her limp body as if she didn't have an ounce of energy left. "Isla, what happened to you, honey?" I asked, my voice breaking. The yellow porch light hit her face, and I was paralyzed by what I saw. Her lip was split with dried blood at the corner. Her left eye, purple and swollen, could barely open. She was clutching her stomach with her hands as if trying to hide a pain. "My husband, he hit me because of his mistress," Isla whispered, her voice choked before breaking into heartbreaking sobs. I felt my blood boil, but at the same time, my heart broke. My daughter, the one I raised and loved more than my own life, was in front of me, shattered. I helped her inside. I laid her on the sofa and ran to the kitchen for a damp cloth and the first aid kit. "Stay still, honey. Let me see," I said, trying to stay calm. Although inside I was a wreck. I carefully cleaned the blood from her lip, but it kept coming red raw, as if it were cutting my own heart. The cut was deep. It wasn't just a skin wound. It seemed to carry a much deeper damage. Isla kept clutching her stomach, her thin hands shaking. Carefully, I removed her hands. I lifted her blouse, and oh my God, I almost dropped the cloth. A huge bruise, black and purple, covered her abdomen as if she had been hit not once, but many times viciously. I felt like I couldn't breathe, as if I had taken the blows myself. "Isla, who did this to you?" "It was Derek, wasn't it?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage and pain. Isla didn't answer. She just cried, and her sobs broke the silence of the house. Without another thought, I grabbed the phone and dialed the number I knew by heart for the town's emergency room. "Dr. M. Valencia, please get ready. I'm bringing my daughter over," I said, hurrying. My car was in the shop, getting the brakes fixed, so I called a taxi. While we waited, I sat next to Isla. I covered her with a blanket so she wouldn't be cold. Her cell phone, which she had left on the table, wouldn't stop lighting up. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw 7 missed calls from Derek and some messages that appeared on the lock screen. "Open your mouth if you want to lose everything." I felt the blood rush to my head. I reached out to grab the phone. I wanted to see more, to know what else he had done to her. But Isla, though weak, snatched it from me in a panic. "Mom, don't look. It's nothing." She looked at me with eyes full of fear, as if just touching that phone would make everything fall apart. I didn't press her, I just squeezed her hand to calm her down. "I'm here, honey. Nothing is going to happen to you." But inside, I knew this had already gone too far. When the taxi arrived, I helped Isla get in, supporting her with one arm while clumsily carrying a bag with the other. On the way to the hospital, Isla was hunched over her head, resting on my shoulder, repeating over and over, "Forgive me, Mum. I didn't want to bother you at this hour, but I couldn't take it anymore. I had to run here." Every word she said was like a stab in my heart. I was her mother. I had promised to protect her all her life, and now she had to come find me in the middle of the night, broken by the man I once trusted. The taxi stopped in front of the hospital, where the cold white light of a neon sign illuminated the words "emergency room." I helped Isla get out my daughter, who could barely stand. Her body was still shaking, and she was clutching her stomach as if holding on to her last bit of strength. I squeezed her hand, trying to hide how my own heart was racing. "I'm here. Don't be afraid," I whispered, though I was terrified too. Dr. M. Valencia, who was on duty, was already waiting for us at the door. She looked at Isla, then at me, with a worried expression, but said nothing. She just motioned for a nurse to take my daughter to an examination room. I followed my feet, feeling as heavy as lead. When the nurse took off Isla's thin jacket, I almost gasped. Besides the bruises on her face, her shoulders and wrists were covered in marks of cruelty, purple and reddish bruises like silent accusations. I stood there motionless, holding onto the edge of a table containing the rage that was burning inside me. "What did this bastard do to you?" I thought, but I didn't dare say it out loud for fear that Isla would start crying again. Dr. Valencia carefully noted each injury, her face serious. "We need to do an X-ray to see if she has any fractured ribs," she said, her voice grave but firm. I nodded without saying anything, just watching Isla lie there, her eyes closed as if trying to escape reality. While I waited for the results, I went down to reception to sign her treatment papers and pay a deposit. My cell phone wouldn't stop vibrating. An unknown number appeared on the screen. I recognized it immediately. If someone was calling at this hour, right after Isla arrived at my house, it could only be Derek. Rage surged through me, and I hung up without even answering. He didn't deserve to talk to me, not after what he had done. When I returned to the room, Isla had fallen into a light sleep, probably from exhaustion. I pulled the blanket up my hands, still shaking. Seeing her face, I remembered the Isla from before, the cheerful little girl who used to run after me in the yard shouting, "Mom, look at me!" Now that smile was gone, replaced by wounds and fear. I sat by the bed watching her sleep, my heart in pieces. I was her mother. I had promised to protect her, and I had let her fall into the hands of a guy like Derek. I blamed myself, but at the same time, a flame of determination began to burn within me. I couldn't let my daughter continue to suffer. Never again. After they put her on an IV and she was stable, I took Isla home. I made her a glass of warm milk, left it by her bed and closed the door quietly, making sure she was asleep. It was almost dawn. A faint light filtered through the window. I went out to the porch to tidy up a bit, and I saw Aunt Rosa, the neighbour across the street, sweeping her yard. When she saw me, she hurried over. Her voice rushed. "Did something happen at your house last night, Alara?" I heard knocking on the door and some crying. I sighed and briefly told her that Isla had been beaten by her husband, that he had kicked her out of the house and she had to take refuge here in the middle of the night. Aunt Rosa gritted her teeth, her eyes flashing. How dare he treat his wife like that? That man has no shame. I nodded, saying no more, but I felt I had an ally. Suddenly I remembered that Aunt Rosa had a camera at her entrance. "Hey, Aunt Rosa, could your camera have recorded anything last night?" I asked. She nodded immediately, opened the app on her phone and showed me the video. I recorded the scene on my phone of Isla at my door, knocking desperately, her faint cries echoing in the night. Seeing that image made my heart ache all over again, but at the same time, I knew it would be a key piece of evidence. I took Aunt Rosa's hand and thanked her from the bottom of my soul. She just patted my hand and said firmly, "Don't forget to get justice for that girl. I trust you can do it." I went into my bedroom, opened the closet, and looked at my police uniform, hanging impeccably. The blue shirt, the khaki pants, the belt, and the gun holster. Everything seemed to be waiting for me. I took each piece, feeling the rough fabric under my fingers. In silence, I changed, buttoning each button, adjusting the belt. Each movement was like an oath. I was not only Isla's mother, I was also a police officer, and I would use everything I had to protect her. When I finished, I picked up the phone and dialed Attorney Vincent's number, the family lawyer. His voice sounded sleepy on the other end. "Hello?" I was brief. "Vincent, start the plan right now." He was silent for a moment and then asked, "Ilara, are you sure?" I answered without a second of hesitation. "Completely. Get ready." I hung up and went to the living room. I took my digital camera out of a drawer. I approached the bed where Isla was sleeping, carefully removed the blanket, and started photographing each of her injuries. The split lip, the bruised eye, the bruise on her stomach. Every time the flash went off, I felt I was not only documenting the physical wounds, but also the deep damage to her soul. When I finished, I sat at the dining room table and spread out all the papers and the USB drive with the video from Aunt Rosa's house. I connected the drive to my laptop and carefully backed everything up. Sitting there watching the screen light up, I knew that from that moment on, there was no turning back. I had entered a war not just for Isla, but for the justice I had sworn to uphold. By the time I finished backing up the video from Aunt Rosa's camera, the clock read 7:30 a.m. Isla was still fast asleep in bed, her face swollen and her lips dry and cracked, as if she couldn't escape the pain, even in her dreams. I quietly went into the kitchen and made a bowl of chicken soup. The smell of onion and herbs filled the air. I brought the tray to her bed and woke her up gently. She opened her eyes, her gaze tired, and was surprised to see me there dressed in my police uniform. "Mum?" she murmured, then shook her head. "I'm not hungry." I sat beside her, trying to make my voice as gentle as possible. To be strong and move forward, you have to eat. Isla looked at me, her eyes watery, and reluctantly took the spoon, swallowing with difficulty. Seeing her like this squeezed my heart. Just a few years ago, Isla was a radiant young woman, always smiling, filling the house with joy. Now she was here, broken, a shadow of her former self. I decided to take her back to the hospital for another checkup. The bruise on her stomach worried me. Dr. M. Valencia received us in the emergency room. Her face serious but without saying much. She ordered a CT scan to make sure there was no internal bleeding. While we waited for the results, I sat in the waiting room, took out my laptop and connected the USB drive. The video appeared on the screen. At 3:02 in the morning, ISLR was at my front door knocking desperately, her muffled sobs echoing through the microphone. Seeing that image made my heart ache again, as if I were reliving that night. I copied the video to an external hard drive password, protected it, taking care of every detail. I knew what I was doing was not just to protect Isla, but to build a wall of evidence against Derek. Just then, Isla's cell phone rang. The screen read, "Derek Highs." I felt my heart stop. I grabbed the phone before Isla could react and turned it off immediately. Isla looked at me terrified. "Mum, if he finds out I talked, he won't leave me alone." Her voice trembled as if the mere mention of his name plunged her into darkness. I squeezed her hand tightly, trying to calm her. "I'm here, sweetheart. Nothing is going to happen to you." But I said no more. I just looked at the clock in silence. It was almost 9:45 a.m. I took the SIM card out of Esla's phone and put in another one I had ready. I didn't want him to find her. I didn't want him to have the chance to threaten her again. The CT scan results came back a few minutes later, confirming that Isla had several severe soft tissue contusions, but luckily no internal bleeding. I let out a breath, but the relief was momentary. The wounds on Isla's body would heal, but the ones in her soul I knew would need much more time. I took her home and called Attorney Vincent, the lawyer. "I have the medical records and the video from the neighbour's camera," I told him bluntly. He scheduled a meeting at his office in the afternoon to gather the evidence. Meanwhile, Aunt Rosa came over with a pot of still hot chicken broth. "This is for Isla to get her strength back," she said with her warm voice. "If you need a witness, count on me." I looked at her, feeling her sincere support, and my heart felt a little stronger. In the afternoon, Isla tried to rest, but she would wake up, startled from nightmares. I sat by her side, trying to calm her, but she just babbled fearfully. Derek pushed me and Chantal. She was in a corner, mocking me. Hearing that, I felt the blood rush to my head. "Who is Chantal?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. Isla told me in a weak voice that Chantal was Derek's mistress, that she had come to their house several times, shamelessly showing off, provoking Derek to take it out on her. Her story was like a knife in my heart. I had eaten at the same table as Derek. I had thought he was a decent man who would take care of my daughter, and now it turned out he was not only cheating on her, but letting another woman humiliate her in her own home. Sitting by the bed, I took out my cell phone and took close-up pictures of the bruises on Isla's wrists, including the watch to show the exact time. With every picture I took, I felt I was not only documenting the physical wounds, but also the pain my daughter carried. I knew these photos would be evidence, but they were also a reminder of what I had to do to protect her. In the afternoon, I took Isla to Vincent's office with a portfolio containing all the evidence I had gathered. He opened it and laid everything on the table, the photos of the injuries, the medical report, and the video on the USB. Vincent nodded, his voice firm. "This is a pretty solid foundation. Now we just need to prove public adultery, and he'll have nowhere to run." I gripped the handle of my purse, knowing perfectly well what my next step was. I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was a cop, and I would use everything I had to make Derek pay. That night, I didn't take Isla to my house. I didn't want her to be in a place where Derek could find her. Instead, I left her at Aunt Rosa's house, my trusted neighbour. She opened her doors for her to stay the night and promised to keep a close eye on her. I returned home alone, my heart heavy. I took off my police uniform and put on an old jacket and jeans, trying to look like an ordinary person and not an officer looking for evidence. I took the digital camera out of a drawer, checked the battery and memory card, and left in my old car. Every turn of the tyres reminded me that I was entering a war, not just for Isla, but for the justice I had sworn to uphold. I parked the car in a dark alley near the Lighthouse Grill, the place Isla had told me Derek frequented. The neon light from the place lit up a piece of the street. I sat in the car, hunched down, camera in hand, waiting. 9:30 p.m, Derek's silver truck appeared, its headlights sweeping the alley. My heart raced, but I remained calm and turned on the camera, ready. A few minutes later, a woman came out from the corner. She was wearing a tight red dress, her lips painted a deep colour, and a cigarette in her hand. She walked with a provocative confidence. I recognised her immediately. It was Chantal, the woman Isla had told me about, Derek's mistress, the one who had made my daughter suffer. Derek turned off the engine, got out and opened the door for Chantal, wrapping his arm around her waist with familiarity. Seeing him, I felt my blood boil. He, the one who had sat down to eat in my house, the one who had called me mother-in-law, was now embracing another woman while my daughter was in a bed full of bruises. I snapped picture after picture. The neon light from the bar clearly illuminated their faces. Each photo was like a stab, but also another piece in the puzzle I was putting together to unmask him. I followed them from a distance to a small hotel with a flashing red light sign. I didn't get close, just stayed far away and took a couple of more photos of them entering the lobby hand in hand. Then I went around to the parking lot and took a picture of Derek's truck license plate, making sure a nearby digital clock showed the time. Each photo was a bullet, and I knew I had what would leave him with no escape. When I got home, I opened my laptop and moved all the photos to a special password-protected folder. I called Vincent, the lawyer, with a determination I couldn't hide. I have the photos of his infidelity. You can see their faces. You can see the car's license plate. Vincent responded with a firm voice. Excellent, Ilara. Keep them safe. Don't let him know you have them. I nodded, although he couldn't see me, feeling a little more relieved, knowing I was one step closer to justice. Just then, my cell phone vibrated. It was Isla, calling from Aunt Rosa's number. Her voice sounded distressed. Mom, he just called a friend of mine to ask where I am. When she told him, she didn't know he threatened her too. I'm so scared. Hearing Isla, I felt my heart shrink. My daughter, even though she had escaped, Derek was still tormented by his threats. I reassured her, you stay calm. Stay at Aunt Rosa's house. I have him under surveillance. But inside, I knew I had to act faster before he found a way to hurt Isla again. I immediately contacted Commander Martel, a trusted colleague at the station. I presented him with all the evidence I had gathered, the video from Aunt Rosa's Isla's medical history, and the photos of the infidelity. I need you to send a patrol to watch the neighbourhood, especially Aunt Rosa's house. I said, my voice hard. Martel agreed without hesitation, but not without warning me first. Ilara, what you're doing is very dangerous, but if you have enough evidence, I'm sure you'll win. I thanked him and gave him a copy of the infidelity photos in case something happened to me. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I sat at the dining room table, organising all the data into files, proof of the injuries, the camera video, and the photos of the infidelity. Each file was like an accusation, one more step to bring Derek to light. But in my heart, I couldn't shake the pain. I had once considered him a son. I had believed he would protect Isola. And now, not only had he betrayed her, but he had dared to raise a hand to her, to threaten her all for another woman. That pain, like a deep cut, hurt me every time I thought about Isola's bruises. The next morning, I took Isla to Dr. Neela Vega, a psychologist Vincent had recommended. Isla needed help to overcome the trauma of the days of abuse. I stayed in the waiting room, my heart heavy. Watching my daughter walk into the office, walking slowly with her shoulders slumped, was like a stone in my chest. I, who thought I was a strong mother, a tough cop, had not been able to protect her from the man I trusted. That pain, like a deep cut, hurt me every time I remembered Isla's bruised face. While I was sitting there, my phone vibrated. It was Mr. Reed, the head of the Public Property Registry, whom I knew from some previous dealings. His voice sounded grave and a little rushed. "Captain Alara, it's not wise to talk much on the phone, but I just saw your name, and your daughter's on a land transfer file. Something strange. If you have time, you should come by." I frowned, not understanding what he was talking about. Isla and I hadn't done any transfer paperwork, but a bad feeling made me get up immediately. I told Neela I would be back for Isla later. When I arrived at the public registry, Ariad motioned for me to enter his office. He opened a file, frowning. "There's something strange here. This land was transferred to a Chantal last week, but since you didn't call me to confirm, I found it odd." I froze. I felt my blood run cold. "It can't be," I exclaimed, my voice choked. "Isla and I never signed anything." Reed shook his head and handed me the file. "The signatures are here with your name and your daughter's, and the transaction is already filed." I took the paper and saw shaky signatures, which looked nothing like ours. I immediately asked, "Who came to deliver these papers?" Reed replied in a low voice, "The employee told me it was your son-in-law, Derek. He said you had asked him to handle it because you were busy." Hearing that, I felt my blood boil. Derek had not only hit Isla, not only cheated on her, but he had dared to forge our signatures to steal the land, my father's inheritance, what my family had cared for years. I tried to stay calm and asked Ariad for a photocopy of the file. He sighed. Someone from in here surely helped him with the paperwork. Before I left, he whispered, "Ilara, this is dangerous. Be careful that no one in the office knows I told you." I nodded, thanked him, and promised not to betray him. But inside, I felt like I was walking on pins and needles. Derek was not just a violent man. He was a manipulator, willing to do anything to get his way. In the afternoon, I went to pick up Isla from her therapy. She looked tired, but her gaze was no longer one of panic. I took her directly to lawyer Vincent's office with the photocopy of the forged papers. Vincent reviewed them carefully, tapping the table with his fingers, and said firmly, "This is the final nail in the coffin. Now we also have proof of fraud, enough for him to have no escape." Isla, sitting next to me, listened in silence, but her eyes filled with tears. "Mum, he dared to forge the signatures to steal Grandpa's land," she said with a trembling voice, both pained and indignant. I took her hand and squeezed it, trying to give her some strength, but I was also fighting my own pain. That land was not just a property. It was a memory. It was my father's sweat, something our family had cared for generations, and Derek had dared to trample all over it just for his ambition and his betrayal. That night I met with Commander Martel and gave him the copy of the fake papers. He nodded his gaze serious. "Your evidence is very solid. I assure you he won't get away." I thanked him, but I still had a weight on my heart. When I got home, I locked all the documents in the small safe in my bedroom. The clock showed almost midnight, but I wasn't sleepy at all. I sat in the dark thinking about Derek, about what he had done to Isla, to our family. That pain, like a slow fire, burned and drove me at the same time. I knew the time had come to face him directly. There was no other option. On Saturday morning, I left Isla at Aunt Rosa's house, the safest place for her at that moment. Commander Martel had someone watching outside, and I knew she would be protected, but my heart was not at ease. I put on civilian clothes, an old jacket and jeans, but I hid a file in my bag with the evidence I had carefully prepared. The photos of Isla's injuries, the video from the neighbour's camera, the hospital report, and the photocopy of the fake land papers. I drove my old car to the Gold Reserve office, the place where he did his business and flaunted his power in town. Every turn of the tyres reminded me that this was not a simple trip, but an inevitable confrontation. The office was open. A smell of machine oil and cigarette smoke hit me in the face. Two of Derek's henchmen were arranging things on the shelves and gave me a sideways glance when I entered. One of them smiled mockingly. "Look, the mother-in-law arrived." I ignored them and walked straight to the back office where Derek was sitting, counting money with stacks of dollar bills piled on a wooden desk. He looked up and gave a fake smile. "What's up, police mother-in-law? Are you so unoccupied that you have time to visit your son-in-law?" His voice was loaded with sarcasm, but I paid him no mind. I hadn't come to argue or chat. I put the file on this desk. Each page was like an accusation. The photos of Isla's bruises, the video from Aunt Rosa's camera with my daughter's cries in the early morning, the hospital report detailing her injuries, and the photocopy of the fake papers he had dared to sign for me and for Isla. Derek glanced at them. His face changed for an instant, but he quickly regained his air of confidence, hiding it with a contemptuous smile. "And what about these little papers? I have better lawyers than you." I looked him in the eyes, my voice cold. "I didn't come to argue with you. If you want to see who's right, we'll see each other in court." He jumped up, his voice restrained, as if I had touched his pride. "Who's going to dare to touch me? Who's going to stand against me in this town?" I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in his arrogant eyes. "I will. Don't think everyone is afraid of you. Yan!" The two guys at the entrance tried to approach, but I put my hand in my jacket pocket, revealing my police badge. They stopped dead in their tracks, their gazes evasive. Derek turned red, slammed the table hard, and almost shouted, "Your daughter is a weakling. She deserved to be disciplined, and don't think that badge will always save you." Hearing that, I felt my blood boil. He dared to say that Isla, my daughter, whom I loved more than my life, deserved to be disciplined. He dared to justify the bruises the night Isla had to flee in pain. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to pounce on him and grab him by the neck, but I held back. I didn't answer, just collected the file in silence, put it in my bag, and turned to leave. Before I left, I turned back and said firmly, "Just so you're clear, From now on, the rules of the game have changed. It's not you who's going to discipline anyone. It's the law that's going to discipline you. Derek shouted at my back, "If you walk out that door, you stop being my mother-in-law, and then don't complain if I get nasty." I stopped, looked at him one last time without a hint of fear. "Well, consider that from now on, you are no longer my daughter's husband." I went out into the street where the wind was kicking up dust from the dirt road. I got in the car and immediately called Vincent. "It's time to file the lawsuit." Vincent replied, his voice calm but cautious. "All right, get ready. He's going to counterattack with everything he's got." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, my heart as cold as steel. I knew this war wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. A few days after my confrontation with Derek at the office, rumours started spreading through the neighbourhood like wildfire. Early in the morning, I went to the market for some vegetables, trying to act normal, but the whispers reached my ears. 2 ladies at the corner stall were whispering that our SLR probably made it all up. They say she talked back to her husband a lot. That's why he hit her. I walked past them and they fell silent, but their gazes followed me as if I were the one causing trouble. In the cafe next door, an old man sipped his coffee and shook his head. Ilara is now using her badge to screw over her son-in-law. Hearing that, it felt like a dagger in my chest. These people who greeted me every morning, who smiled at Isla when she was a child, now so easily believed Derek's lies. I lowered my head and quickened my pace, trying not to let them see my eyes, is welling up with tears. At noon, Vincent called me to his office. He placed a stack of papers in front of me, his voice grave. "Derek just hired Jay Vance, a lawyer from the capital. He filed a counter. He says Isla made everything up to extort him and that you're abusing your authority as a police officer. I took the lawsuit. I saw Vance's signature in blue ink, still fresh. The words on the paper were like direct accusations against Isla and me, as if we were the bad guys, the ones trying to ruin Derek's life. Isla, sitting next to me, turned pale and said with a trembling voice, 'Mom, he wants to make me out to be a liar.' Seeing her, I felt my heart clench. Isla, my sweet daughter, now had to endure not only the bruises on her body, but also the slander of the man she once loved. I took her hand and squeezed it, trying to give her some strength. But inside I felt an indescribable pain. I had thought this town where I was born and raised would be on our side, but now it seemed the whole world was turning its back on us. In the afternoon, I took Isla to Aunt Rosa's house. As we passed through an alley, I saw Derek's 2 henchmen standing there smoking, staring at us. One of them lifted his chin and said sarcastically, "Be careful. People around here believe Derek more than you." I didn't answer, just squeezed Isla's hand and got her into the house. But those words were like stones thrown at my heart, making me feel more alone than ever. I immediately called Martel to inform him of the threat. He promised to reinforce patrols at night, but his voice also sounded worried. "Ilara, be careful. That guy's trying everything to turn the situation around." I nodded and thanked him, but inside I knew I was walking a very dangerous path. That night I went to the corner store to buy something to eat. The owner, an acquaintance of many years, took me to a corner and whispered, "Ilara, be careful. People are saying all over that you made everything up to take the land from your son-in-law." Hearing that, a chill ran down my spine. The people who had been my neighbours with whom I had shared stories now believed I was a schemer. I thanked her, tried to smile, but as I left the store, I felt the world was caving in on me. When I got home, I found an unmarked envelope slipped under the door, inside a note in scribbled handwriting, "Shut up, or you lose your daughter." I took the paper. My hands trembled, but not from fear. I was furious because Derek dared to threaten my daughter. Furious because the people around me were so easily manipulated. I carefully filed the note in the evidence file, knowing it would be another piece to unmask him. Late at night, I had an emergency meeting with Vincent at his office. He saw the threatening note and nodded slightly. Good. The dirtier he plays, the more he tangles himself up. But public opinion is on his side. We need a strong blow to change things, and the only one who can do that is Chantal. Hearing Vincent mention Chantal, I felt a small light of hope ignite in the darkness. Chantal, Derek's mistress, could be the key to turning the situation around, but at the same time, I knew bringing her to our side wouldn't be easy. I stood there in the dim light of the office, thinking about Isla, about the bruises on her body, about the lies that were suffocating us. That pain, like a slow fire, burned and drove me at the same time. I was not going to let Derek win. I was not going to let his lies hide the truth. The day after the tense confrontation at the office, I found out that Chantal used to frequent a small bar at the end of Hidalgo Street. I knew it was my chance to change the course of the game, to turn the tables on the hand Derek thought he had won. I put on a baggy jacket and a cap, trying to go unnoticed. When I entered the place, ranchera music was blasting, cigarette smoke hung in the air, and the smell of beer and tequila mixed in the atmosphere. I chose a table in a dark corner, sat down and kept my eyes on the door. I didn't want to be recognised. I didn't want any of Derek's people to see me before I could talk to Chantal. Around 10 at night, she appeared in a short, tight dress, her lips painted a deep red, and a cocktail in her hand. She walked with a confidence that seemed forced. I looked at her and felt a mix of anger and pity. This was the woman who had contributed to my daughter's suffering, but at the same time, I knew she was also just a pawn in Derek's game. I took a deep breath, got up and sat across from her. Chantal raised an eyebrow, her voice defensive. "And who are you?" I didn't answer right away, just placed an envelope on the table in silence. Inside was a copy of the fake land papers Derek had schemed, along with a bank statement for Chantal, full of accumulated debts and the risk of foreclosure. I looked her in the eyes and said sharply, "I'm Derek's mother-in-law. If you stay on his side, you'll go down with him, but if you cooperate, you'll save yourself." Chantal let out a mocking laugh, but it vanished from her face as soon as she opened the envelope and saw the papers. She turned pale. Her gaze faltered as she saw the forged signature on the transfer and the red numbers of her debts. I continued in a cold but firm voice. "The police commander already knows everything. As soon as the trial starts, you'll be called to testify for fraud. And you could even face a serious sentence. Is that what you want?" Chantal was quiet for a long time. The hand holding her cocktail was trembling. She downed her drink in one gulp as if to give herself courage, and then said in a shaky voice, "Derek promised me he'd give me a share of the land. He said everything would be fine, that I would have it all. But now I understand he just used me." Hearing her, I felt a bit of pity. Chantal, though misguided, was another victim of Derek's manipulation. But I didn't let my emotions get the best of me. I looked at her intently. "You have one last chance to get out of this clean. Tell the truth at the trial. I will take that into account." Just then the bar door swung open and Derek's 2 henchmen walked in. They looked around and their eyes locked on me sitting with Chantal. They approached with unfriendly faces. Without hesitation, I took my police badge out of my pocket and placed it on the table. Want to try something? Go ahead. The dim light of the place shone on the badge, and the 2 guys stopped, slowly backing towards the door, their eyes still full of hatred. Chantal was breathing heavily, pale as a sheet clinging to the edge of the table. I looked at her and said in a grave but determined voice, "See, Derek can't protect you. He's only going to drag you down with him." Chantal bit her lip. Her eyes were torn between fear and determination. Finally she nodded. "Okay, I'll testify, but you have to promise me I'll be safe." I didn't promise much, I just nodded. "If you do the right thing, I'll do everything I can." Dang. I immediately called Martel, told him the situation, and asked him to get a secure apartment on the outskirts for Chantal to hide in. Leaving the bar, I walked down the cold, dark street, the wind making me shiver. But inside I felt a great relief. I knew the battle had turned. Derek had just lost his most important piece. The morning of the trial, I woke up at 5 when the sky was still dark. I went to the kitchen and made a light chicken broth. The gentle aroma seemed to want to calm the tension that filled the house. I brought the tray to the bed where Isla was still sleeping. Seeing her there, her face still a little swollen and her lips dry, squeezed my heart. I woke her gently, whispering, "Eat something, honey, so you'll have strength." Isla opened her eyes, her gaze tired, but she nodded and sat up slowly. I helped her put on a long light blue dress and put a thin scarf around her neck to cover the bruise that was still visible. I fixed her hair and said softly, "You don't have to hang your head anymore." Isla looked at me, her eyes watery, but she didn't say anything, just took my hand as if it were the only way to feel safe. Outside the house, Commander Martel was already waiting for us with a patrol car. He greeted me with a nod. His look was serious, but warm. "I've arranged an escort, Ilara. Everything will be fine today," he said. I thanked him, feeling a bit of relief knowing I wasn't alone. On the way to the courthouse, I saw the townspeople gathered in the square whispering. Some looked at us with curiosity, others nodded slightly as if in support, but there were also those who shook their heads with mistrust. The rumours Derek had spread still hung in the air, and I knew that today's battle was not just against him but to reclaim the truth. Arriving at the courthouse entrance, I saw Derek. He was standing there in an impeccable suit, his face red and his gaze sharp as a knife. Beside him, the lawyer, J. Vance, seemed calm, but I knew he was tense. Chantal was there, too, standing far from Derek, her arms crossed and her gaze distant. Seeing her, I remembered the night at the bar when I convinced her to switch sides, and I felt a spark of hope. But I knew today wouldn't be easy. I took Isla's hand and led her into the courtroom. Inside, the place was packed. The old wooden benches creaked as people settled in. I saw Aunt Rosa in the back row. She nodded at me encouragingly, as if to say she would always be there, supporting us. Judge T. Blackwood entered, and the whole room stood up. The air felt thick. The only sound was the whir of the ceiling fan, like the heartbeat of the room. Lawyer Vincent began. His voice was deep and confident. He presented the case. Each piece of evidence was laid out before the court. The photos of Isla's injuries, Dr. Valencia's report detailing the lesions, the video from Aunt Rosa's camera that recorded Isla's cries in the early morning, and the copy of the forged land papers that Mr. Reed had provided us. When Vincent projected the video on the screen, Isla's knocks on the door and her faint sobs filled the room. I heard murmurs among the people. Some were wiping their eyes. I looked at Isla beside me. Her hands were shaking and her head was bowed. I put a hand on her shoulder and squeezed it gently, as if to tell her I was still there, that I would always be there. Lawyer J. Vance rose to rebut. His voice was sharp. Isla invented everything to extort my client. Captain Ilara abused her authority as a police officer to coerce and slander. Those words were like daggers in my heart. I wanted to jump up to scream that he was lying, that Isla's bruises were not an invention, but Vincent signalled for me to calm down. He presented Derek's threatening messages, which were clearly visible on the big screen. "Shut up if you don't want to be replaced." The room fell silent. Isla bowed her head. Her hands trembled more violently, and I knew she was remembering the month she lived in fear. I squeezed her shoulder, trying to give her some of my strength. Then it was Chantal's turn. She took the stand, trembling her gaze, hesitant. "Derek promised to give me a share of the land," she said, her voice shaky but clear. "He pressured me to accept the transfer papers, saying everything was arranged. But the truth is he forged his wife's signature to steal the land from her." Derek jumped up, shouting, "You betrayed me!" The court guards had to force him to sit down, while Judge T. Blackwood said sternly, "Order, or I will have you removed from the courtroom." Chantal bowed her head, but continued to testify. Each word was like a hammer shattering Derek's lies. Seeing her, I felt a little relief, but I couldn't help the pain in my heart. Chantal had been part of Isla's suffering, but now she had chosen to be on the side of the truth. When it was my turn, I took the stand and swore before the court. I looked directly at the people, my voice firm. "I am a police officer, but today I am here as a mother. I will not allow anyone, not even my son-in-law, to destroy my daughter and mock the law." I pointed at Derek without a trace of fear in my eyes. That man is not a husband. He is not a father. He is just an abuser and a liar. The whole room murmured. Some of the people who had believed in Derek looked at each other confused. I saw Aunt Rosa's gaze. She nodded as if telling me I had done the right thing. Finally, Judge T. Blackwood stood up to read the verdict. His voice was grave and clear, but I didn't hear every word. I only knew that he issued a protection order for Isla, froze all of Derek's assets, nullified the land transfer, and sent the case to the district attorney's office to investigate the crimes of usury and domestic violence. A roar of murmurs filled the room. Derek slumped in his chair, his face pale as if all his strength had vanished. J. Vance remained silent, taking off his glasses to wipe away the sweat. I took Isla's hand and led her out of there. The midday sun shone brightly on the courthouse steps, and I heard people whispering, "Ilara won! Justice won!" But inside I knew that this victory did not erase the wounds Isla had suffered. I only hoped that from this day on she could begin to find her smile again. The afternoon of the trial, when Judge T. Blackwood finished reading the verdict, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. I didn't hear every one of his words, but when I saw Derek collapse in his chair, his face pale, I knew he had won. The ruling dictated a protection order. For Isla froze, Derek's assets annulled the fraudulent land transfer and sent the case to the district attorney's office to investigate the crimes of domestic violence and usury. When I took Isla's hand and we left the courthouse, the midday sun was shining on the steps and I heard people whisper, "Ilara won, justice won." But inside I didn't feel victorious. I just felt relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But the pain was still there, like a scar that would never fully heal. That same afternoon, the police went to the Gold Reserve office to arrest him. People crowded the street to watch. Some whistled at him, others shouted insults to his face. I wasn't there, but the next morning, when the local newspaper published a photo of Derek in a prison uniform and handcuffs under the headline, "Office Owner Arrested for Violence and Land Fraud," I felt something strange. It wasn't joy. It was a kind of liberation. He who had sat at my table, who had called me mother-in-law, was now paying for what he had done. But that feeling was quickly replaced by sadness. I had trusted him. I had thought he would take care of Isla. The pain of being betrayed by a family member, like a slow burn, still seared inside me. Chantal disappeared from town a few days after the trial. It was rumoured she had gone to San Lucas to look for work, to start over. I didn't blame her. She had been part of Isla's pain, but in the end she had chosen the truth. Derek's two henchmen, the ones who called themselves the Shadows, were also arrested for witness tampering. The neighbourhood suddenly felt calmer. There were no more hateful glares or silent threats, but I knew that the wounds Derek had left on Isla and me wouldn't disappear so easily. Isla moved in with me permanently. The first few days she could barely sleep. She would wake up, startled, every night, sweating, screaming, "Mum, he's coming." In those moments, I would sit by her side, take her hand, and whisper, "Oh, it's okay, honey, you're safe now." But seeing Isla, I saw myself years ago, when I too kept silent in the face of my own pain. I took her to Dr. Neela Vega, the psychologist, every week without fail. Neela listened to Isla with patience, helping her face her nightmares step by step. After a few weeks, I started to notice a change. Isla no longer covered her face when she went out. She no longer hung her head when she walked through the market. One afternoon, I found her in the kitchen making enchiladas, and as she folded the tortillas, she sang softly. That song, as gentle as the wind, brought tears to my eyes. It had been so long since I'd heard my daughter sing. It was as if the sun was starting to enter the house again. The town also began to change its attitude. The neighbours who had doubted, who had believed Derek's rumours, now greeted me. Some came up to apologise with regret in their voices. "Mrs. Alara, we didn't know the truth." I just nodded without resentment. I understood that Derek's lies had been convincing, and not everyone has the courage to stand up to someone like him. Aunt Rosa came to visit with a tray of sweet bread, and she hugged Isla tightly. "You turned out stronger than your mother in her day." Seeing them laugh together warmed my heart, as if people's kindness still existed despite the dark days. I continued my work at the station. Every daily patrol was a reminder of my duty. Every time I encountered a case of violence, I felt more determined to help other women break the silence. Once I found a young girl crying outside the station, her eyes red, clutching her purse. I sat next to her and said in a soft voice, "You're not alone. My mother lived it. My daughter lived it, and I too stayed silent once. But today, I know that silence only feeds the monster." The girl looked at me. The tears were still streaming, but there was a new glint in her eyes. I knew I couldn't erase her pain, but at least I could show her that someone was willing to listen. A few months later, Isla felt strong enough to go back to work. She got a job in an accounting office in the town centre. That night she came home late, opening the door with a radiant smile. "Mum, I got the job." I stood up and hugged her with all my might, and we both cried. They weren't tears of pain, but of joy, of liberation. Seeing Isla there, smiling like the sun, reminded me of the little girl who used to run after me in the yard, shouting, "Mum, look at me!" I knew the wounds in her heart were still there, but she was learning to move on to find herself again. That night, I sat on the porch. The wind was blowing coolly. I remembered the night Isla collapsed at my door, her face covered in bruises, telling me in a trembling voice what Derek had done to her. I remembered the months of struggle, the sleepless nights, the moments I thought I would break under the lies and mistrust of the entire town. But then I looked at Isla's smile today and I thought, justice is sometimes slow, but when it comes, it can give you back your breath, your laughter, and even your future. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold now, but I felt a peace in my heart that I hadn't felt in a long time. Isla had come back, and I thought I carried the scars of the past, had found a reason to keep fighting, not just for my daughter, but for all the women who need someone to stand up for them. The story we tell is fictional, but it is based on some real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I'm genuinely curious. If it were you in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to be silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to get your voice back? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.